Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Tonight we're joined by Stephen Akinsanya from 15 NBS Chambers, and I think that is the full mouthful. It's a bit of a tongue twister. Um,
That's right.
but yeah, so thank you so much, Stephen, for joining me this evening. Well, this afternoon, and I'm so excited to have you on. So we're going to cover a couple of topics this afternoon in this episode, but also worth noting that Stephen is a advocate and a speaker for youth violence and knife crime. And if you go onto Stephen's LinkedIn, which I'm sure Stephen's happy for everybody to follow, but if you go into the LinkedIn, there's a lot of content and clips and things like that, which is how I ended up harassing Stephen to come on my podcast. So thank you very much. So Stephen, so firstly, you have been a barrister for 29 years, is that correct?
Actually 32 now.
Oh, 32. Okay, so I have not updated myself with the Chambers website. So
That's all right.
years you have been a criminal barrister for. I mean, that is phenomenal. So how did you how did you get into the world of the bar and the criminal, was it always a criminal bar or?
I guess it was, but at the time I didn't understand what the criminal bar actually represented. I just knew as a young boy watching a television program many years ago. Some in the older audience will remember a program called Crown Court, and we used to watch that sometimes at lunchtimes, and it depicted courtroom cases with a defendant, a judge, and a jury. And when I decided I wasn't going to be a pilot, 'cause I actually wanted to be a pilot first of all, but I just struggled with sort of maths and science. So I then stumbled on this program and just fell in love with the courtroom, the drama of the courtroom, the advocacy, the judge, the way the lawyers spoke and the way they dressed. And I thought, yeah, I think I would like to do something like this. Although I didn't quite know what it was, in the sense of the criminal bar, but being a lawyer, yeah.
So now if you could sum the criminal bar up in a few words, what would you say about it? That you think that maybe some young aspiring barristers like myself might have misconceptions of the criminal bar?
Well, I think you just got to understand that when you first have these aspirations, I think it's easier now because of the advent of social media. So you can find out very quickly what barristers do, what they are, how you distinguish them from a solicitor. So I think for up and coming lawyers today, it's much easier to say, oh, I like the look of that. I can research what it actually is to be a criminal barrister, which is an advocate in the courtroom in an adversarial system, arguing cases, either for the prosecution or as a defense barrister. And I think it's easier, as I say, to equip yourself with the information to make a decision about what you want to do for the future.
So thank you so much. So when you first started out, did you have to literally go in, ask barristers and solicitors for information? Or how did you manage to familiarise yourself with the criminal bar and understand what it was all about?
Well, I regularly tell the story that in those days you physically had to walk to your local library, to go and look up in the law section about the legal profession, about court cases, which is what I did. And then when I was a little older, I managed to tag along with a cousin of mine who was a barrister. He wasn't a criminal barrister, he was in employment law. But I got used to the world of being around Lincoln's Inn, which is where he practiced from, and seeing barristers' chambers, and then slowly but surely educating myself about what they do and who they are. And then when I got a little older, one of my friends who was a few years ahead of me at school, he trained to be a barrister. And I was able then to go to court and watch him, and watch cases he was doing. And so that was my introduction into the world of sort of criminal law.
Yeah. And have you seen a shift from when you first started out to now? Have you noticed that the bar's changing, or is it relatively the same?
Yeah, I mean, it's changed in a lot of ways. I think you see it's more ethnically diverse, I would say, from the early 90s. There's a lot more women in practice, which is great. And yeah, people from more diverse backgrounds. Certainly when I started, when you talk to a barrister about being a barrister, you had this notion of them coming from a particular background, particular school. but that's very much changed now. You've got barristers from all walks of life, from different socioeconomic backgrounds and diversities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that you know, I think some chambers do certain mini pupillage periods where they will have like they'll only allow people from different ethnic backgrounds to come within that season. I think that's really good because then it gives like, you know, people from different ethnic backgrounds at the time for them to be specifically assessed rather than
Sure.
assessed with multiple other people and not multiple other candidates. And I know my friend Jordan participated in the I think it's like the 1,000 black interns or something in London,
Yes.
which is really good as well. And I think
Uh,
schools are starting to promote it a lot more as well, aren't they? And it's just
that's right.
all changing. The world is changing for the better as well.
Yeah.
So in terms of 32 years as a criminal barrister, are you still loving it?
Yeah, I mean, like most vocations, you have your good days and your bad days, but it's still an exciting profession. No case is the same. You're in different locations with different judges, different opponents in terms of whether you're prosecuting or defending, and the work is varied. So you're always constantly excited. It's not mundane.
Absolutely. Is there a certain case or an offence or a trial that you feel like you have more expertise in and you enjoy doing them the most, or is it across the board?
I think it's across the board. I think as you develop your practice, you have a particular interest in certain cases, but generally, criminal barristers uh, can turn their minds to pretty much anything within the criminal cases calendar. So whether it's a fraud case or a murder case or a sexual offences case, most barristers are very well aware of the issues that arise in these cases and are fully equipped to deal with them. I think as you get older, you may take a slant as to the kind of cases you want to do, but certainly throughout your career, you do a myriad of cases.
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of touched on a little bit there, some challenges that you faced when first coming to the bar. Um, what challenges do, and I know we've all got it a lot easier than what it was like back then, but in terms of this generation, what challenges do you think that are more common and are going to show their face a little bit more for the younger generation to face, and how would you say for them to overcome those challenges?
Um, well, I wouldn't say there's a lack of work, which sometimes used to be the issue, because as you most probably know, the criminal bar, we don't have enough criminal barristers at the moment coming through the system. And that's why we have this problem with a huge backlog of cases, because there are only a certain number of barristers, whether you're prosecuting or defending, to do those cases. So I don't think there's an issue in terms of um, work that will be available for barristers coming through. But there are the financial constraints, because criminal law, it perhaps is not the best paid in terms of the legal profession. Although I still think you can earn a fairly decent living if you're busy in a good set of chambers. But the constraints that are placed on the criminal justice system in terms of funding means that financially it's difficult for barristers to get started. A lot of criminal chambers can't offer the kind of pupillage awards that other sets of chambers doing other areas do. And of course, you've got the cost of training to be a barrister. I know that when I was at bar school, I think the fees were around £3,000, and I think now it's closer to 15. And so there are financial challenges, and obviously despite what I've said, finding pupillage and finding tenancies is still difficult. But I would still encourage young people who are interested in this work to go for it, because there are opportunities and there is a need.
Absolutely. Are you seeing when you do the visits to the schools and things, are you seeing a lot of interest from the younger generation wanting to go into the legal profession?
Oh, for
Yeah.
sure. And that's part of the excitement for me when I do the talks at schools and colleges, that when you talk about cases in your work and they get to try on the wig and gown,
Yeah.
you see the excitement of, a budding lawyer. And it takes me back to when I was a young kid, with the same excitement. So there's no end of interest amongst young people, which is refreshing and encouraging to see.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, I agree. And so then in terms of, we'll just touch briefly a little bit because I'm so interested about this. The Turks and Caicos Bar,
Caicos.
yes. So how did that all come about? So that's fantastic. I mean, I know that destination because Drake goes on holiday there.
Right, I
With
see.
Kardashian and Beyonce. So when I'm
Right.
following all of the celebrities and where their destinations are, that is one of them. So just how out of curiosity, how did that come about?
So I went to a university called Buckingham University, which has students from all around the world, and so I was very lucky to be in that place. And when I finished and I graduated, I went back for a period of about 10 years consistently doing an advocacy training program. And I met a number of students, and one particular student said to me, "Look, when I graduate, I'm going to go back to the Turks and Caicos and open my own law firm. That's my dream." And true to his word, he did. And once he had established the firm, he invited me over as a senior advocate, as they call them over there, to come over and practice in his firm. So I went over for a period and was lucky enough to be called to the bar in Turks and Caicos. And I did a number of cases, some really interesting and important cases on the island. And it was quite romantic, you know, getting up in the morning and going for a swim in the ocean before court, or flying between islands in a propeller plane. It was all quite surreal, but it was a fantastic experience. And I hope one day to return.
That is absolutely phenomenal. So what was it like waking up there? Just unbelievable. Was it very picturesque and
Oh,
beautiful?
yeah. I mean, it's, you know, it's paradise. It's, if you think about Death in Paradise, the program, and it's not far off from that. You've got beautiful turquoise water. It's picturesque, beautiful islands. And as you say, it's a place where a lot of the celebrities and the very rich go to play. So
Yeah.
you can bump into all sorts of interesting people. Um, but notwithstanding that, the rule of law has to prevail. And so there's a court system there with judges and barristers doing criminal law and all a myriad of different types of work to do with property, commercial work, because it's a place where a lot of rich people have transactions in property. And so it's quite an interesting place to be.
So you did it, I'm sure you did quite a lot of different things over there then whilst you spent your time there.
Yeah, I mean, murder cases,
Um,
coroner's inquests, some commercial disputes. It was really interesting work.
yeah.
And yeah, I think there may be a question coming up which relates to the Turks and Caicos, and a memorable case that sticks in my mind. But yeah, I have very fond memories of being there.
So off the back of that, you talk to us about the memorable case and why that sticks in your mind and just a little bit of
Yeah. Well,
background.
I mean, as you know, as advocates, we're regularly asked, it's the number one question you're asked at any party, you
Mhm.
know, when they find out you're a criminal barrister, how can you defend someone knowing they're guilty? And I said, well, it doesn't quite work like that. Very few defendants, if any, tell you, look, I'm guilty and you must represent me. There are other protocols that we have to observe if that is the case. But in this particular case, it was a murder case where, you know, barristers are not machines, we're human. And when we look at a case, we look at the facts and the evidence, and you can, in the back of your mind, have a view about a case, but you're called to represent someone. And this particular murder case was quite horrible. It was the rape and murder of a young woman. And no one on the island really wanted to do the case. None of the criminal lawyers really wanted to touch it. But I agreed to do it with my colleague who had opened the firm. And we saw it as an opportunity actually to put his firm on the map, as it were, because it was a very interesting case. And the difficulty was that I had spotted something in the case which meant that there was a legal argument, or a technical point, if you like, that I could take. And in terms of morally, do you take that decision? Professionally, do you take that decision? And I had to professionally take the decision, no matter what my thoughts were about the defendant himself. And I took the point, and it resulted in him having the murder case against him, kicked out, or what we call stayed. And it meant literally that there was no jury, there was no determination of whether he was innocent or guilty. The case just stopped because it had to in law. And he literally did get away with murder. And that haunted me because it was a case involving DNA evidence, and his DNA was involved. And so the judge had to get rid of the case. And then subsequently, I found out a number of years later that he had in fact committed another murder elsewhere on another island. And that haunted me. It did trouble me for a long time. And it still sticks in my mind today. But professionally, I had to do what I was supposed to do. And I should say that the law was changed as a result of that case.
Wow, I mean, thank you so much for sharing that. And I can only imagine, this is the shock faces going across the screen. I can only imagine, you know, so, well, where you've just said there that it haunts you, how did you, I guess, manage to just think, I need to park this and move on? How did you manage to battle that emotional difficulty and turmoil in your own mind?
Well, I think you've got to recognize that, in any vocation, particularly when you talk about law and to an extent medicine, you have a particular function to play in the system. And I always tell people that, look, in the criminal justice system, I can only ever be one thing at one time. And it may be that I'm a prosecutor, or it may be that I'm defending, but I cannot be the prosecutor, defender, and judge and jury. I can't. And so I had to reconcile that in my mind that, look, I was a defense advocate. I had a particular task to do. I used and operated within the law, and it was the judge who made the decision in accordance with his role within the legal system. And between us, we fulfilled our legal function. And of course, that's all that you can do. But that's not to say that you don't have those moments when you think, wow, I was involved in that. And at the end of the day, someone's lost their life and there's a family, and you start thinking about all those things. But it's a bit like, the doctor who has to treat someone who has done something very, very bad, and everybody knows he has, but he comes into the hospital ward. The doctor can't say, I'm not treating him. He's taken an oath to treat, and that's what we do.
Absolutely, and like you said, professionally, you were there, you were instructed to do something, and you couldn't have ignored that. Absolutely, yeah, and rightly so. So, I mean, has there been any other cases like that where you've known the person has committed the crime and you've still had to, and they've maybe got off?
Well, similarly, the murder case here in the UK, there was a case called the Crown and Solaire, and if you Google it, you'll see all about this case. I was involved in that case where a young man was acquitted of murder after a trial at the Old Bailey. And so there was no issues there, but then he was subsequently charged with the attempted murder of another girlfriend, in which he apparently had then confessed to her that he got away with the first one. And so it was the first case of double jeopardy where they were able to retry him for that murder on the basis of new and fresh and compelling evidence. And on the morning of the trial at the Old Bailey, where he was going to be retried for the original murder and the attempted murder, I remember going down to see him, and he confessed that he was responsible for both, and he pleaded guilty, and he's now doing a life sentence.
Oh my good Lord, wow. So yeah, so I really thank you so much for talking to us about those cases, because I think it doesn't ever really get mentioned that often, and I think it's a little bit of a taboo topic maybe, where people won't really admit that they've actually had these type of experiences, which I'm sure across the board there's a lot of other barristers who've had the same experiences. But for you to have had it in two different, well, an island and also in the UK as well. But yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, because that is a realistic side of the bar, which is definitely why I set a podcast up like this.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you so much. And I mean, that has shocked me. It's the fact that he confessed. It's just like, but I mean, I guess that must have been a burden that he was carrying as well, maybe, and probably felt a lot better for just coming clean. Obviously, feeling better now and doing a life sentence.
Yeah.
Okay, brilliant. So let's talk a little bit about the youth violence then. So the trends that you've seen across youth violence now. As everybody knows, youth violence is on the rise a little bit within this country. Obviously, I'm based in the northeast, but I hear about all of the stories in London, and there's a lot of, the story last week where they killed the 14-year-old boy on the bus, they stabbed him to death, and there was the girl who got killed. So there is quite a lot of it, and it does always seem to be either involved in it with a knife or a gang or something of the sort. But in terms of the trends that you've observed and the patterns that you saw, what have you witnessed and seen across the years, and what are you seeing now?
Sadly, just more and more young people carrying knives, becoming desensitized to using them. I often think about a lot of the cases involving young people losing their lives, and I can't help thinking that having taken a life, and because of the access to social media, you'll see what you've done, and then you'll go to bed like nothing happened, and then you wake up and have your breakfast like nothing happened. I just think, wow, is that where we've got to? But sadly, there are more young people carrying knives for all sorts of reasons, but they're prepared to use them, and some very dangerous weapons, not knowing the full implication, or perhaps some of them do and don't care, but the full implication of, when you take a life, you're not just destroying your own life and the person who you've killed, but there's so many people. I call it the ripple effect of misery, and sadly, for a number of reasons, as I say, we're just seeing an increase, not just in London, but across the country, of young people prepared to carry and use weapons, and the most deadly weapons. And we've got to do something.
And I mean, these other knives that they're getting, like aside from kitchen knives, which are just as bad, there's these zombie knives, and there's these
Yeah,
like, it is outrageous. I've been in done a couple of mini pupilages in London, and I remember last week the episode before this I hosted her on a Judge Canavan, and it was one of the cases that she was trial judge on, and the footage that was played of the knives, like I've never seen anything like it in my life. It was so big, and they're getting them off the dark web, I think it was, or the black market or something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
And yeah, they putting them down the trouser legs, and they're carrying them. And there was another case, and it's like what you've just said there, where people are carrying them for many different reasons. I'd really love to get your take on this. So there was a case that I had observed when I was doing a little bit of judge marshalling in Wood Green Crown Court, I think it was, off the back of my head. And the defendant had carried a knife in his pocket. He was from an area in North London, a really rough area. And the prosecution were trying to say that he would have been prepared to use it had there have been an altercation. He said he didn't mean to carry it. It fell into his pocket, and the jury found him not guilty. But um, it's difficult, isn't it? Because there's young boys and young girls probably that come from really normal walks of life, and that are just in a really bad area where there's a lot of gang infiltration and affiliation, and they're carrying them, I guess, in a way to protect themselves. But it's such a double-edged sword, because like what you have just said there, and they are prepared to use them, and
Yeah.
if they do use them, then there can be detrimental effects. So can you understand when they say that they're carrying them to protect themselves, even if they haven't got any gang affiliations?
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine that if you're in a particular area where other people are known to carry weapons and intimidate, and you've been on the end of it, and you feel like you can't talk to the police or a parent or a guardian, and then because of the maturity of the young mind, you think, well, I'm going to arm myself, without thinking, 10 steps down the line, what happens if I have to use it? What happens if I do use it and someone ends up dead? They don't think that far, but I can understand why some young people feel they've got no choice but to carry a weapon to protect themselves. But how we got to that situation, is the deeper question, and how we fix it is even deeper still. But it's a sad reflection that there are, amongst some young people, I won't say all, but there are some young people who feel they have to carry weapons because they're scared and they want to protect themselves, or they don't feel that the police or anyone else can protect them.
Yeah, I think what you've just said there is amazing. Like, because this podcast gets shared around to some of the schools in the areas. I think I mentioned that to you before.
Yeah,
What you just said there is so important for people to remember, that it's not just a decision of taking it out physically, it's what you're going to do 10 steps down the line if you have to use it. And I think that that's maybe what they're not thinking about when they're going out and using these things. But how sad is that we're living in a world where they have to carry something in a way to feel protected, because they can't go to, because there's this stigma around the police, and you're a
yeah.
snitch about the police and all this palavering. I do think that it's just, I think social media is really damning as well. And what do you think in terms of then do you think that there's a correlation and a link between this drill music and the drill lyrics and the gang rapping and then the knife crime? Or do you think it can be independent and correlated at the same time?
I think it can be independent and correlated at the same time. I mean, look, music as an art form comes in many different spheres, and people listen to all sorts of things and are not influenced. It's a bit like a video game. Some people can play Grand Theft Auto and it's just a game. But for some people, they act out what they see. It's all to do with the individual. And so I think there are some people who watch and listen to the drill music and the lyrics and the way people dress and the lifestyle, and they think, oh, that's something I want to embrace. There are others who listen to that music and it's just music. But I do think there is an element that is involved in youth violence and knife crime. But there are other reasons as well, because there are some people who don't even listen to drill who are involved in youth violence. So I think it's an easy thing just to put it all in one jar and say, oh, that's what it is. It's not just that. It's a myriad of things.
Absolutely. And like people, like Jay-Z, for example, years ago, and I do think that now the drill music is starting to get used as a scapegoat in this country for something much bigger.
Yeah.
Multiple different factors. It's not just that; it's the fact that we access these knives and all of it, grooming on if they're all those type of things.
Yeah.
But I think that it's starting to really get used as a scapegoat in this country, and I think it's definitely starting to probably like a little bit of institutional racism as well. The fact that people are using like these black boys rappers trying to be good for themselves, which is what is so ironic, is the message that they're sending by making this music is they're trying to get out of what they would call the hood or whatever area they're getting like villainized for that, and villainized for having an impact on other youths. And I don't think that there's just one reason. I agree with you. I think it's a lot of different reasons. There was a case I worked on when I was a paralegal. I did a criminal appeals paralegal role for a few years, and there was a case I worked on where one of the clients came from a drill scene background and unfortunately was found guilty of murder under the legal doctrine of joint enterprise. And there was two children somewhere around the country that had basically just stabbed another person to death, and they were really young as well, under 14 years of age. And that client got the blame for it 5 years on. And he was like, I'm serving a life sentence. How on earth can I possibly be now influencing these children? But they had this status and a rap status. That's what the media decided to cling on to, really.
Yeah.
In terms of the youth violence trends, then what you're seeing, and I know knife crime is a big one of it. It's incorporated a lot into it now. But what else are you seeing? Is it like theft and what other types of trends are you seeing within youth violence other than just knife crime?
Well, there's a lot of drug use, a lot of cannabis use, and then moving on to Class A, a lot of supply of Class A drugs. And of course, at the end of all of that is the financial reward, because it all boils down to money. I mean, some people, yes, they'll smoke cannabis, certainly for recreational use or medicinal reasons, but a lot of people are not driven by that. They're driven by the financial reward of selling it and Class A drugs. And so obviously with the drugs comes the violence. So they go hand in hand, if you like. And so it's hard to separate them, but those are generally the types of offences or offending that you see.
And do you find that it can start off with something as, and I'm not diminishing the crime, but like something as little as, say, for example, supplying Class B drugs, and then before you know it, they're in a network of criminal behavior and things like that, and then next thing you know, they're carrying weapons? And do you think it starts off like that as well, and it can start off as easy as that?
Yeah, because if you can imagine that someone who starts off just selling or supplying Class B drugs, and then it becomes being sold in larger quantities, then you're trying to protect the area in which you are dealing. And then there is a need then, if you're looking to protect your area, to then arm yourself with a weapon in case you need to use it against rival sellers in the area. And then the thing just escalates.
Yeah, so it's like a really, really deep rabbit hole, isn't it? And it's like you can start off in one place and end up in another one quite quickly.
Yeah.
So in terms of the motivation that you got then into what stemmed you to then become a speaker on this on youth violence and knife crime, where did that come from, a case or that you did, or was it just trends that you were
Yeah, it did actually come from a case a few years ago where a young man was tragically murdered outside Clapham South Tube Station here in London. And I remember, preparing the case, as I always do, prepare the case, and you're looking at the post-mortem photographs. And, I've got children of my own. And for the first time, I'm looking at this body on a table, a young man who was 17 years old, hadn't even started to live, and he's now gone. And my son saw me in the kitchen working away, and he saw me literally in tears, um, which I'm not ashamed to share. And he asked me, what's wrong with you? And I said, look, I've been doing this work for a long time now, but it's scary because now these young kids, they could be my own children. This kid I'm looking here could be you. And that really hit me hard. And I thought, yeah, look, professionally, I always do what I can do, like many barristers do. We try our best for our clients. But I really got immersed in the preventative steps. How can I stop another young person making a wrong decision, losing their life, or being incarcerated for decades? I've got to, I want that to be my legacy, not how many cases I won, because there are so many good barristers that people might have their own views about how good or bad I am. But I know that with all the work that I've done and I'm doing, I have, hopefully changed many lives and got them to make better decisions.
Absolutely. And what do you think for you? What do you think is your strongest, the strongest part about the journey that you're on now in terms of being a speaker? What do you think is got the chance to make the most influence? Do you think it's the speaking at the schools? Do you think it's the LinkedIn post? What do you think is able to reach the younger generation a lot quicker?
I think it's a combination of the two. I think, we've got to use social media more for good and positive things. But there's a need for more interventionist work. We need to get into the schools earlier, because sadly the youngsters are becoming younger and younger who are involved or exposed to knife crime. So I think we need to do a lot more work getting into schools, academic institutions very early. And also, as I say, using the various platforms available to educate youngsters and their families about things like joint enterprise, because I'm amazed that a lot of people still don't understand the full import of joint enterprise and how it can ruin you, even when you're not involved in something directly. So I think there's a lot of work to be done.
There was a question that I got asked in one of my scholarship interviews, which I thought I did diabolically on. I thought I did really badly on, but I actually managed to get the scholarship, so I was over the moon. But one of the questions I got asked is, what area of law would you change? And I said the legal doctrine of joint enterprise. And I was speaking to another friend of mine who has secured pupillage and is about to commence pupillage this September. And this person did not even know what joint enterprise was, had never even heard of it. And
What?
yeah, honestly, and I think so many people who are not aware of it or not aware of the full extent of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, there you are. I mean,
And they are going into a crime pupillage as well.
no.
Yes, yeah, they are, yeah.
Wow. Well, I mean,
So
therein lies the explanation for why it's important to carry on this work and to educate. Because if someone going into a criminal pupillage does not know about the law of joint enterprise, then you can bet your bottom dollar that a young kid from living in a certain part of the country, neither he or his parents are aware of what joint enterprise is and the impact it can have were they to get involved in uh, an offence involving many people where someone ends up being stabbed.
absolutely. What like, so in terms of going into the schools a little bit earlier, what else do you think can be done to educate and using social media? What else do you think can be done to using, for educating people on joint enterprise and just youth violence in general?
Well, I run a program which I've done for the last 4 years, and in fact, I just started it another Crown Court, Wood Green Crown Court, where we get young people to come into the court, not because we say they're, criminals, but we're saying, look, this is the work of the Crown Court. This is what we do here. And you're going to hear from a mother who's lost their child. You're going to hear from a surgeon who operates on youngsters who've been stabbed. You're going to hear from someone who was involved in that lifestyle and is now reformed. And you're going to hear about the lawyers who actually do these cases and the judges who try these cases. So you'll leave this building knowing a lot more about youth violence and the realities of it through your exposure to just being in a courtroom. And I would love, I mean, my dream is through this project to every major court center in the country should be running a program where it has young people coming into the court regularly, not just to watch cases when they're old enough, but also outside the court hours for them to come in and be spoken to by those involved in the criminal justice system. And so that includes the police, probation, judges, lawyers, everybody connected with it, doctors, surgeons, all of the people who have a role to play. And I think that way, the younger the audience, the more informed that they will be, rather than watching things on TikTok and other social media platforms, which actually glorify this kind of behavior with youngsters running around with knives and getting likes. Come and hear the realities of it. No one talks about how they had to serve 25 years in prison and what that feels like, or even 5 years in prison.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely incredible that they've got the opportunity and that there's that exposure through the project that you've started for children to be able to go in and see that, because it's so rare. It's like, when do you ever really get a chance to sit down with a judge or a barrister as well? Even just a barrister, when do you ever get a chance to sit down and speak with a barrister as a young person? You really don't get that chance, and a lot of schools find it really difficult to get barristers in because of the tight schedules. And I know that, when I've spoken to the schools around the North and Eastern area, they all like to share that they've made the children sit down in one of the periods of their lessons throughout the day to listen to some of the podcast episodes from Call to the Bar, because the children would never get the chance to meet a barrister. And so it's good for them to, will you participate in a podcast this evening? Where for children to start listening. And when you then, I guess, show these young children the real realities and the harsh realities of what actually goes on, what is their reaction? Do you see them audibly, visibly shocked and audibly gasping? Are they like, oh, wow, shocked? Or
I mean, so most young people are shocked. There are obviously some who find the whole thing very, very funny, but I've learned to accept that there's some people who will not learn the impact of something until they have to physically experience it. There's an old Caribbean saying that if you don't hear, you'll feel. And so many young people who are fortunate enough to have this kind of exposure, and they hear real stories from people who've been in that lifestyle, and they're telling them, look, it's not a lifestyle that I'm telling you to embrace, because this is what happened to me. Many of them think, wow, that's not something I want to be involved in. Or they may even know somebody who is involved in that, and they say, listen, you never guess what, I went to this thing and listened to these people, and I'm telling you, you need to check your behavior. So that the impact is wider than just people who are physically in the room. Young people know a lot of young people who are not in the room, and it's this word of mouth and changing the culture, because there's a culture. I call it that. There is a culture of, it's cool to carry a knife. It's cool to pose with knives on social media. We have to change that. We have to change that mindset and culture.
absolutely. And do you think that there are that social economic backgrounds and things like that do influence a young person's likelihood of being involved in violent crime and carrying knives? Do you think that does have weight as well?
Yes. I mean, well, it's easy just to say, well, if you come from a challenging area or a challenging social economic background, you're doomed to carry a knife. That's not what I'm saying, and that's not anybody should be saying, because I know plenty of kids who do come from those backgrounds and are not involved in knife crime. But it does play a part for some people who come from very challenging backgrounds in the most desperate of circumstances, which you can't really envisage, because hell, and we're in the UK, but there are some people in some very difficult challenging circumstances, backgrounds, and they are more exposed rather to the advent of becoming involved in youth violence. You know, if you add into the mix, if you're excluded from school and then you fall out of the education system, or you end up in a pupil referral unit where, you know, I'm not saying all pupil referral units are bad, but there's certainly places which foster some young people who have some real deep-seated problems, and the youngster becomes exposed to that and then more involved with offending, youth offending. So it's as I say, it's a very complex issue that requires some really hard decisions and thought processes and collaboration if we're really serious about challenging it. What, you know, what you called, you know, the root causes.
Absolutely. And do you think, like, because there's so many different layers to it, isn't there? Do you think, you know, for example, the local authorities, like of the areas of the places that we're referring to, that they would benefit from training and intervention to understand what spotting the signs, and teachers even maybe, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes if children are, my little brother sometimes goes to school and I'm like, Ethan, you can't say that to your teacher, you know, it's really rude. And but it's like this TikTok exposure that he's got, and he thinks everything's really funny and it's hilarious. And it's like, if his teachers had that little bit more, not power as such, but a little bit more like grounding to be able to stop that type of attitude and that careless, reckless attitude, maybe that would then, you know, prevent it from spiraling into the age where they can reach the age of criminality and things like that. And do you think that, you know, there's a lot of other people that all it's like kind of like a beehive, isn't it? Everybody's all working together, and you know, people like social workers and teachers, that they could all benefit from that type of training and talks as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we need to have what I call a sort of multi-agency coordination and collaboration, who are readily available to go into schools at a very early stage, working in conjunction with the police, working in conjunction with senior leaderships at schools. And it takes all of those things coming together to really, really start to make inroads into tackling youth violence. Because if you try and do it in a silo, your chance of succeeding is very much limited. And I think we, you know, as a nation, we're losing this sense of community. You know, I really think we've lost it, and this is part of the problem, that the real sense of community is gone. As you can look at community policing, you don't, I mean, many people don't even know what that is. You know, when I grew up, you know, and I'm not that old that it was horse and cart, you know, and we were around when cars were on the road and the color TVs were color. But you know, even back then, you know, you did have community policing. Police were visible on the street, which acted as a deterrent. But young people, you know, would not be scared to talk to the police, and have the comfort of having a police officer around. Because contrary to what people think, and I say this to many young people, when a young person is stabbed, and I've seen it in many cases, when a young person is stabbed, the very first responder often is a police officer who's massaging the chest of the young person who's been stabbed in a desperate attempt to keep them alive. And we need to remember that. And so, you know, some people are not in favor of police being in schools, but I think police have a role to go into schools and speak about their work. And I know many agencies doing great work, many people who are very, very experienced and gifted in dealing with some of the most challenging children from challenging backgrounds, who together, working with schools, are able to reach those children and hopefully prevent many of them from going down the road of youth violence. But again, it's all about will, purpose, and investment. Because, yeah,
Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you
that's
there.
good.
And it's like what you've just said there about, you know, the culture that you referred to earlier on. There's this same culture of hate the police, and it's so prevalent in young children. And where you've just said there, you know, there'd be so much benefit from police officers building that, regaining that trust again with young ones, and young ones realizing that they're there as a pivotal support within society and within a community, and that they're not, you know, like when these young children say, "I hate the pigs" and things like that,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, and it's just, you know, that if that attitude was changed, maybe like what we said earlier on in the podcast, where you said that people feel the need to carry knives because they don't feel like they can approach an officer or a parent or a guardian. Well, maybe if that relationship was established with the police again, then they wouldn't have carried the knife in the first place.
Yeah, I think, everybody needs to step up their game and move with the time. So the police have a job to do in the way in which they relate to the younger society and that level of trust, and not perhaps being quick to judge people based on appearance. And because don't forget, the police look at TikTok, and they look at all these other social media platforms. And I would say to a youngster, imagine police officers looking at the same social platforms as you do, seeing people who dress in a similar way like you. They're going to form an impression when they see you dressed in that way, where a young guy on a social media platform waving around a machete is dressed. So if they stop you in the street, well, you might not be surprised, because their level of intelligence, unless it's police-led intelligence to stopping an individual, their source of reference is often what they see and encounter on a daily basis, not just on social media, but in their work. So there needs to be a lot more collaboration, what I call community collaboration, with police going into schools and young people becoming accustomed to seeing police in that environment, who they can talk to and relate to, and feeling safe, that they can go to and say, look, there's this potential problem. But then we live in a culture of we can't snitch on anybody. So what do you do?
I know, and it's just like a cycle, isn't it?
Yeah.
So in terms of then, because we've just obviously opened our eyes to how much of a dangerous situation the country's in, and things, but in terms of the criminal justice system, what do you think are the biggest weaknesses and biggest strengths of the criminal justice system when dealing with youth violence?
The biggest strengths, I would say, is that you do have people in my profession who are committed, first of all, to seeing justice being done. So prosecutors and defenders, barristers, ensuring that the right people are convicted and those who are innocent are acquitted. Judges who are committed to passing sentences which are commensurate within the law, but also recognizing the background from which certain individuals come. And being a judge is not easy, because you've got the public baying for blood, effectively saying, oh, that person should have the key thrown away. But judges can't do those things. They can't impose life sentences on someone who's been convicted of a stabbing, unless the circumstances are very unusual. As you most probably know, those who get whole life orders, is very, very few defendants, very few. So the criminal justice system, what it does well is that those who work in it do their very best within the confines of the law and the financial constraints that we operate under. That said, the bad thing is those who hold the purse strings are not investing enough in the criminal justice system. So our courtrooms, many of them are a disgrace. You have barristers working under very poor conditions, and judges too. Juries are frustrated by delays and all sorts of problems, which then undermines the work that's being done in the courtroom. And then you have conversations about, well, should we do away with the jury system? And I think that would be terrible if we had trials without juries. Maybe there's some cases that you don't require a jury, but I think the jury system is what makes our system strong. And I've been involved in this profession long enough to see that it works to the extent that evidence is presented and juries make the decision, not a sole judge or a panel, but the juries are people from the same walks of life as you and I. So I think, on balance, yes, the judicial system, the UK legal system, I don't have much experience of other legal systems around the world, but I think it is up there as one of the best. And I think if I ever got in trouble, I'd want to be tried here rather than somewhere else. But in order for it to be sustained, not just for the public, but for the lawyers coming through, we need to invest. Everything is about investment, whether it's investment in time, investment in people, or financial investment. It's all about investment. If you don't put the investment in anything, it will crumble.
Absolutely. So, and thank you so much for that, because I do think it is about the fact that the money and public funding is so dire at the moment. I mean, solicitor firms can't even hire paralegals at the moment because
No,
money.
no, no.
It's just outrageous. And in terms of then where you said about how the judge has got a really hard job and that can be really difficult. Do you think that the sentencing guidelines strikes a good balance between punishment and rehabilitation when it comes to dealing with these type of offences of knife crime and youth violence?
I think there is scope to make sentences more uniform, because I know that there is sometimes a disparity in cases when people are sentenced, and you think, well, how is it that someone receives that kind of sentence and a different sentence for the same offence? So I think there needs to be more uniformity in the sentencing. And I think some of the sentencing, certainly after maybe the first or second offence, should not just be a mandatory minimum sentence, but it should be a mandatory minimum sentence, which means that you do all of that sentence, not half or 2/3 or any portion of it. You do all of it, because there has to be a level of deterrence. Because I know from my observation of seeing social media, and I spend a lot of time watching and being involved in it because of this work that I do, that many young people laugh at the criminal justice system in terms of its lack of consistency in sentencing. And many of them feel that, well, I'll get away with whatever I'm doing to a point, and then even when that point comes, nothing really major is going to happen to me. And so we have to have this balance of being fair and giving opportunities for people to rehabilitate, and not just self-rehabilitation, but the rehabilitation that comes through the probation service and the work that they do with young people and youth justice. But also there has to be an element of fair, if you like, of the consequences, because if you don't fear the consequences, where's the incentive to stop? And so it's a balance that we have not quite reached, in my view.
Absolutely. And in terms of then, where you've said about how the police have got exposure to social media as well, they're seeing a trend, they're seeing a certain type of person, so they're stopping that person. How beneficial do you think the stop and search tactics are, especially when tackling knife crime? Do you think they are beneficial? Do you think it's causing more distrust between the younger generation and the police?
Well, I think this, yeah, I think, as I said before, the police have a lot of lessons to learn themselves in the way in which they go about their work. And I think stop and search can be targeted through police intelligence, but it can also be random. But if you're going to stop people, you have to do it within reason, for a good reason, but also in the way in which you engage with that young person. That makes all the difference. And so I think stop and search is a necessary tool, but I also recognize that not all people who carry knives carry them at that moment. Knives are concealed in places ready for use. They're buried in hedges. They're all sorts of things. But if you are going to stop people randomly because you think that they might be involved in an offence or carrying something, then it should be done in a way in which those who are not carrying those weapons feel that that encounter with the police was fair and I was treated properly with dignity. And I think if the police learn that as part of the job of needing to stop and search people, people will be more receptive of saying, yeah, I think it's a necessary tool. Because you ask any parent who's lost a child, they will tell you, I want stop and search. If you ask people who are regularly stopped and searched, they say, oh, I'm being harassed. So it's difficult. But, if we are to detect those who are carrying weapons, and you and I both know there are people walking around, even as I speak now, up and down this country, with a machete concealed down their trousers, ready for use. And I've been involved in cases, I have some cases now, where people were in a public space with the most horrendous knife, ready to use it, and the police need to do their job. People will thank them for doing their job if their loved ones are saved from being stabbed and murdered.
Absolutely. It really is. It's just all everybody working together, isn't it? And there's so many lessons to be learned. And I think that that's definitely the theme I'm getting throughout this conversation with you. So it's such a bigger picture than just one straight answer. And it's in terms of what message you would have to young children, and I know you obviously tell these children all the time when you do your talks to the schools, but could you tell us what you say to them? What's your advice to them?
My advice to them is that I cannot believe that any young person came into this world to leave it before they were 20 at the hands of a knife, not through an illness, something like that, which I understand, but at the hands of a knife because of a dispute or because of a decision to take another life where you erase your own life as well, often before you've even learned to drive, you've never been on holiday, you've never left your borough where you live, your loved ones who you cherish, the only way they're going to see you now for the next 10, 20, or even more, 25 years is behind a screen in a prison where you're moved up and down the country. And I tell young people, think about all those things, the ripple effect, as I call it, of not just ruining your own life, but the lives of your family and the lives of the other youngster, the life that you've taken. Think about those things. And if that doesn't mean anything to you, then we're in a very sad place. But if it means something to you, then be informed about the decisions you're going to take and choose to live. Choose to live rather than die.
Absolutely, yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing that. And just really quickly, then we've scrutinised the criminal justice system briefly, but in terms of reform, then what would you like to see in the criminal system?
I would
Of
like to see a more sort of uniform approach to dealing with this issue of youth violence. You know, we've had all sorts of amnesties about carrying knives. We get the celebrities involved, and it all looks great for a bit. But year after year, it's still happening. So that must not be working. So I think we need more parent accountability. We need more engagement from parents to know what your children are doing, and to be concerned about what they're doing and seek help where you're able to, if you're not able to deal with your children. But we need, as I say, more of the community aspect, more community policing, more collaboration between police and schools, more involvement at local government level, which also means more involvement at national level and a commitment and willingness to tackle this thing called youth violence. We don't need any more sound bites. We don't need any more stuff on TV saying, oh, look who's involved in knife crime. We need action because someone's losing their child. I sat with Eliane Andam's mum, the schoolgirl who was murdered in Croydon, on the Friday it happened, and I've never been so sad in my life, seeing a mother broken. That could be your child. This thing does not discriminate, and so it's incumbent on all of us. Young men particularly need more role models. We need more mentorship. We need more opportunity because for many of these youngsters, if you're not offering them a viable alternative in a modern world, which is changing so fast with the advent of AI and everything else, if we're not offering those youngsters an alternative, because not everybody can be a lawyer, not everybody can go to university. But what about the skills, the trades, the apprenticeships? What are we teaching the next generation? What are we offering them as a viable alternative to jumping on a train to go down to some part of the country to go and sell Class A drugs? What are we offering them? And if we don't have a viable offer, alternative, well, guess what's going to happen? And so we need to invest. When we talk about reform, we need proper solutions, not sound bites. That's what we need.
Absolutely. And in terms of what you've just said there about Eliane's mum, the girl who was stabbed, and do you think that that defendant, like, absolutely horrific, heinous crime, do you think had he had not had the means to access a knife that easily, that the outcome would have been different? Or do you think he would have just found a different method to kill?
No, I think if we had not had the access to weapons, because the weapon of choice now for people involved in youth violence is a knife. Rarely is it a gun. I mean, gun is more associated with gang activity, but it's so easy to pick up a knife, whether it's from your kitchen or to get one through the dark web or some other source and use it. Knives are what people are using, and access to it was easier for him. and he decided that morning to take it with him and use it in that tragic way that he did.
Yeah, absolutely. And so and really quickly then, in terms of because I'm really excited to ask this, you have Life in Focus TV. It's podcast, am I
Yeah,
podcast? So
yeah.
how did you start that? And obviously, I'm just trying to get some inspiration and some tips for my podcast as well, my
Well,
competition.
no, it was born out of that it was born out of that case that I told you about in Clapham South, and I thought, you know what, that was a joint enterprise case, and it dawned on me that so many young people do not understand what joint enterprise is and how it can impact you. So I started the Life in Focus podcast. In fact, I've got a show this evening
Yeah,
in about a couple of hours where I'm going to be talking to a father whose son was murdered. And that's what inspired me to what I call educate, inform, and inspire young people. So it doesn't just focus on youth violence in a negative way. It also is aspirational, saying, look, there are opportunities. I have entrepreneurs come on the show, young people who've turned their lives around, people who work with young people, saying, look, here's a viable alternative. These are things that you can do to live a better life, a fuller life.
absolutely. That's incredible. And to like the episode that you're doing tonight, I'll definitely listen into that. And I think everybody should follow that as well, because I think that is just such an eye opener, and especially for me, trying to become a barrister and hoping to become a barrister one day. I think it's about understanding so many of the contextual factors to get a bigger understanding of what's going on in society, and not just going into this role with just a little legal mind frame. It's not just about the legal mind frame. It's about educating yourself a lot more as well.
Yeah.
Uh, and in terms of you and your proudest moment in your career, then could you pick one?
So say that question again.
Your proudest moment in your career, could you pick one, and
Ooh.
but what you're the most proudest of, or and why you are proud of yourself for that?
Um, I think perhaps maybe a case that I did in the Court of Appeal, that was an appeal from Luton Crown Court, and it, I was up against a very difficult judge, and I was advocating for someone who I didn't want to go to prison. And I thought on a point the principle that they shouldn't. And the judge did send the person to prison, and I went to the Court of Appeal and argued ferociously for her, and the Court of Appeal agreed with me that the distinction I was seeking to make was a correct one, and they reduced her sentence, which meant that she would be released. And for a while, it was a leading case on this particular area of law, and that was a proud moment. I really felt that I'd made a difference for not only someone's life, but in the law. I made a contribution to the law, and so that sticks with me, along with a couple of other things. One other was that I was involved in a case where I made a decision to try and use my iPad, and no one had ever used an iPad to call a witness overseas, and that sort of gave birth to what we call, the online hearings, because I was bold enough to ask the judge whether I could do it, and we couldn't see any other practical way around it, and the judge agreed and allowed me to call a witness using my iPad, with all the jury looking at my iPad as we cross-examined this witness. And it made a difference to the case, and we won the case. And I remember writing an article about it, thanking Steve Jobs for
Wow.
his iPad invention. And then shortly after that, we then had the advent of online hearings. So I'd like to take a little bit of credit for that.
Absolutely. So, and just, I'm going to blow a little bit of smoke up here, but how do you think you became such a formidable advocate and an amazing barrister? Because you are, I've read Chambers' website, you are clearly fantastic, and everybody speaks so highly of you. How do you think you've managed to do that?
I don't know about that, but all I would say is I'm constantly learning. And I remember one of the first talks that I ever had at bar school by the late Edward Ducan, Queen's Counsel at the time. And he gave the most amazing lecture about what it means to be a good barrister. And the thing he said is, you never stop learning. And I never stop learning, whether it's from a junior barrister who I've led in a case, or someone more senior than me, or my colleagues. I'm forever learning. And the minute you think you know it all, or you are the best thing since sliced bread, then you have a problem. But I'm grateful for your comments. But yeah, I think the secret is never stop learning, never stop wanting to be better than you are, and see every case as a new case, and don't wallow too much on the successes of your previous case. Keep going.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Well, I can't thank you enough for joining me on what is a really relevant and important topic, and I can't wait to share it around. Thank you so much for your time. I know that you're really busy as well, and I know you're
okay, love. Okay, love. Have a good flight.
Oh,
someone's online.
Someone's having a good flight.
Yeah.
But thank you, honestly, thank you so much, Stephen. It was great.
Sorry.
It's okay, don't worry about it. It was great to meet you virtually as well, and thank you so much for your time. And can everybody give you a little follow on LinkedIn and things like that? If that's
yeah,
okay?
sure. If you need to follow me, you can find me very easily on social media and on LinkedIn and Life in Focus. But yeah, please do.
And I'll share the podcast episodes around as well. And yeah, I can't thank you enough. Yeah, I just really enjoyed tonight's episode, and I hope you did too.
Thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and take care. And I will I'll see you around hopefully.
Okay, take care then.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye.